virus, and there really is quite a lot of new information that's coming out, as you can imagine. None of it in particular good. Iran may have many more coronavirus cases than reported, Canadian research suggests. This is from 2 days ago. The true number of coronavirus cases in Iran may be upwards of 18,000, according to a preliminary analysis by Canadian researchers, suggesting an epidemic there nearly 200 times larger than what the country has reported, and a situation with potentially grave global consequences. So a spokesperson for Iran's health ministry said Tuesday that the country had 95 confirmed cases of COVID-19, as the disease caused by the novel coronavirus is called, and 15 deaths. The true extent of the outbreak is, quote, not only concerning to people in Iran, but also to Canadians and everyone else on the planet, said Isaac Bogok, co-author of the analysis and an infectious disease specialist at Toronto General Hospital and University of Toronto. And I'll put the links in the show notes for this, but it's really pretty bad. If you're in the chat, I'll put the links there as well. Please don't forget to help out the show if you can at freedomain.com/donate. That's freedomain.com/donate. Now, there are also, in South Korea, since yesterday, more than 505 new COVID-19 cases. That's up 40% in one day. And what's amazing, too, is that they've done over 13,000 tests in just one day to find the new 505 cases. South Korea has now completed 66,652 tests in total. And America, of course, is running much, much slower than that. There's a fellow named Joseph Kim, who is on Twitter, of course, and he had some interesting arguments to make. You can take these with whatever grains of salt you want, but I think that they're important. He said, I was quite disconcerted and alarmed with President Trump's press conference on the coronavirus today. I believe the public is not aware of how dire the current situation has become. We have wasted valuable time, and in my opinion, we should have been on a war footing last month. We need to allocate unlimited funds to this effort immediately. The situation I see is that is most grave is our supply lines. 80% of critical pharmaceuticals and PPE is sourced from China. We're talking about things such as antibiotics, heparin, etc. I suspect, he says, that even the large hospital systems likely only have reserves to last 1 to 2 months due to our shift to JIT, that's just-in-time logistics. I was talking about this, of course, weeks ago. Without heparin, for example, thousands of people would be at risk of dying. We are talking about dialysis patients, hospitalized patients, surgical patients, etc. Given China has halted exports and will likely halt exports for some time, we are at risk of severe supply disruptions at a time that we are about to face an unprecedented epidemic. I am so alarmed, he says, that I hope my tiny voice can reach our leaders. Now is the time to put aside politics and concerns about the economy/stock market. Time is up. We must act immediately. He said, we bailed out the banks in 2008. Why can't we put similar effort to save our healthcare system? Well, why indeed? That, of course, is a very, very big question. And, you know, I'm not a conspiratorial guy. I think I've got those bona fides. I've got those credentials. I am not a conspiratorial guy. But my Lord, when there are significant indications that the coronavirus outbreak started in November, early November, and we didn't really find out about it until 2 months later, this kind of cover-up is truly astonishing and astounding. When the Chinese Communist Party, which according to some calculations has been responsible for hundreds of millions of deaths over the course of its existence, if you count the one-child policy wherein they have been recorded dragging women who are pregnant into hospitals and, well, let's just say terminating the pregnancies with extreme prejudice, that this government, which Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, has expressed his admiration for, that this government, when it wanted to deal with coronavirus, said it's very, very important that lab safety and lab security be followed to the letter and be upgraded. A country which, according to most analysts, has an open secret that it is continuing to pursue ethnic-specific biological warfare mechanisms. In other words, it is trying to build weapons out of viruses that can target specific ethnicities. And, you know, it's funny, years ago I was on Joe Rogan. I was actually on Joe Rogan a couple of times. And he was asking me, well, how would a stateless society deal with the threat of invasion? It's like, well, you would just design a virus that targeted the specific DNA of the person in charge of the invasion and release it. And people were like, you've got to be crazy. It's like, no, when you're sufficiently ahead of your time, it looks indistinguishable from insanity at times. You know, there's an old Arthur C. Clarke, the pedo head, science fiction writer. The Arthur C. Clarke said any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Any sufficiently advanced prognostications or predictions are indistinguishable from madness, at least until they come along. So yeah, I just wanted to point all of that out. I hope that you will do some sensible things with regards to this. This is the great benefit of listening to this philosophy show. You know, if you listen to me about Bitcoin, if you listen to me about other things, you'd be sort of ahead of the curve. Here's a time to listen to me again. Please, my friends, get some non-perishable food items. Get some water. Get a generator if you can. Get solar-powered whatevers if you can, if you need to recharge things which you will or may need to do. Please make sure that you are prepared. There's a list at Cernovich.com. He's done some work on this as well. Bags of rice, bags of lentils, canned goods with a 6 month to 12 month shelf life, you name it. These are things. Look, what's the worst case scenario? You bought some extra food which you can consume over time. There's really no negative to this kind of preparation, but it is very important because it could get very bad. People are saying, well, you know, the death count isn't that bad and it's only a 2, although I've seen 3.5% death rate and so on. It's like, yeah, well, just it depends on the number of people who get infected, and the number of infections is growing enormously. As what, half a dozen new countries reported it last night. This is a pandemic, and expecting the World Health Organization. I've noticed YouTube puts these little World Health Organization info buttons on the bottom of these presentations of mine. The World Health Organization is just another socialist piece of garbage that kowtows to China and is going to do everything it can to downplay the severity of what could be going down. And it doesn't take a lot of deaths to overwhelm a healthcare system. I read just the other day, what are there, like 100,000 critical care beds in America as a whole? It does not take. You know, the medical system is very, very finely calibrated on the basis of a fairly minimal amount of illness and injury that occurs. You know, you've all seen the TV shows where it's like, oh no, a bus collided with another bus, and, you know, every doctor has to be called in and no one can go home for 2 days because there's just that. It is very finely calibrated to a particular number and amount and sequence and prevalence of illness. And if that spikes, then it is very easy for the healthcare system to become overwhelmed. Of course, I hope it doesn't. We all hope it doesn't. But, you know, if wishes were horses, beggars would ride. Hope, as I learned in the business world, hope is not a strategy. And you can, of course, be called the crazy guy in your social circle by talking about this kind of stuff. But maybe it's my Boy Scout training when I was a kid. Be prepared, be prepared, be prepared. And if you can get masks, get masks. If you can avoid social gatherings, if you can avoid crowds of people, do so. You know, as I talked about in the video yesterday, there are indications that this thing can survive for a couple of weeks. There are indications 14% of the people who recovered got reinfected. That's not good. That means your antibodies aren't kicking in. It's like the cold, right? It mutates or changes, or there's some sort of shuffle of the deck of the RNA or whatever, and next thing you know, you get sick again. And this is why, I've heard researchers talking about, they've got the DNA sequence. They're going to come up with an inoculation. They're going to come up with a vaccine. Yay, that'd be great. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Let's cross our fingers and hope that's going to be the case. But given the rapidity at which it seems to be mutating, and given the fact that people can get reinfected, I'm not holding my breath. Well, actually, I kind of am holding my breath, because that is the reality, of course, the aerosol transmission of how this thing gets around. So, I always try to provide maximum value to you guys. I love you, you lovely, wonderful, kind-hearted, thoughtful, critical, godlike listeners. I love you guys from here to the moon and back. And I just want you to be safe. Japan is closing down its schools till April. This is not a flu. This is not a bad cold. This is not a bad cough. Whether it targets only East Asians, I've heard that that's just like some off-chance comment. I don't think it's been thoroughly tested. So don't think that you're safe if you're not an East Asian. And really, really work to tell people. Because here's the thing. You've got to spread this information around your friends and extended family. And I'll tell you why. Because let's say that you are smart and you lay up a whole bunch of supplies, right? Hey, odds are you probably won't need them, but it's better to have them and not need them than to need them and not have them. You understand how that works, right? But here's the thing. It's the ant and the grasshopper story, which is another, well, that and The Emperor's New Clothes, the two most influential fairy tales of my youth. Oh, plus, of course, the benevolence of the state. But if you lay up, say, 6 months worth of non-perishable goods, right? Some food, some lentils, some rice, some beans, whatever it is you're going to do, right? Let's say that you lay up that stock in that store, but you don't bother to tell your neighbors, your friends, your family about the possible risk of what's going on. Well, guess who's going to come over when you have this, if there are interruptions in the food supply, which it seems almost inevitable that there will be at least some reductions. Or even if everything remains the same, there is going to be a spread of panic. And I'm not trying to spread panic here. I hope none of this comes to pass. I'm not even sure what odds I would give it, but preparation is key. The readiness is all, as Hamlet says. Because what's going to happen is you're going to lay up this food, you're going to lay up these supplies, and then people are going to come over. And they're hungry, and they need your stuff, and they want your stuff. So if you can convince them to, it doesn't have to be, nobody has to go into debt. You don't have to buy, 400 pounds of sirloins and stock them in the local snowbank. What I'm saying is get people to just, buy some extra groceries. All we're talking about, buy some extra. You'll be actually surprised if you don't roam around too much how little calories you need. I noticed this myself. If for whatever reason I'm not working out too much, my calorie consumption goes down by at least 500 calories a day. So you just need to be prepared. You need to get other people to be prepared. It's a weird kind of little cycle, right? Like every 100 years, there seems to be some big pandemic. You can go back and look throughout history. Of course, the last big one was in the 1919, 1920 situation with the Spanish flu. And it's unlikely that it's going to be that bad. But here's the thing, once it's out in Pakistan, once it's out in India, these are not places with massive hygiene practices. This is, once it gets into the Ganges, man, it's an artery of infection that's just going all over the place. And then, of course, what happens is, and we saw this happen when the Europeans landed in the New World, and smallpox transmitted from the Europeans to the North American indigenous population. What happened was, of course, people saw everyone around them getting sick and dying, and because of various superstitious beliefs and so on, because there was no germ theory back then, germ theory wasn't around until the late 19th century. But they fled. And this is how these things spread, is that there's a concentration of illnesses and people flee. You saw this in Wuhan, where millions of people left the city when there was this illness, rumors of illness and illness floating around. Of course, this was Chinese New Year as well, so I'm not putting it all at the feet of COVID-19, but what happens is people freak out, they panic, they buy everything in sight, which is not great if you're like the third person in line, and then you start to get rationing. Right, so you start to get stores that say, well, we're not going to sell you more than X number of tins, and then you get a black market, you get what is called price gouging, and then the government starts chasing the black market profiteers all over the place, and things get pretty hairy, pretty chaotic, pretty quickly. But the way that it spreads is like you think of like you throw a big rock into the middle of a lake or a pond, and then those ripples spread from that impact. And the impact is a certain area gets infected, people then flee, and given that this thing can survive for weeks on people, even when they're asymptomatic, it's just a huge huge issue, and I hope that none of this comes to pass. And I'm not even going to tell you what the odds are. And the odds of, I mean, it's not going to be anything like the Spanish flu. This is the modern world with modern communications and modern technology and modern medicine. There may be certain places where that is the case, but it's not going to be anything like that. It's not going to be anything like the Black Death. It's not going to be anything like dengue fever. It's not even going to be like malaria, which after they banned DDT, killed like 60 million people because apparently, well, DDT was just so bad that you had to sacrifice 60 million people on the altar of Rachel Carson was wrong in Silent Spring. But anyway, so I just wanted to sort of bungee in and talk about this. I have avoided urging people for this kind of stuff because it's easy to misinterpret. And the last thing, which will be, I'm sure, be completely discredited, but as my lovely listeners, I always want to be honest and share my thoughts. A couple of things that are interesting. Patents on coronavirus is interesting. The fact that Johns Hopkins last October ran a simulation wherein tens of millions of people were killed by the spread of a coronavirus. The fact that many elites have been buying up bunkers in New Zealand and looking for a place to hide out. I don't know, man. It's a creepy series. I'm sure they're all just coincidences. I'm sure that they're all just coincidences. But, you know, we are pattern identifying machines, and sometimes we're pattern making machines. I hope that this is a making rather than an identifying machine, but do not expect any particular help. You know, I wrote this on Twitter. I said that the elites, they won't close the borders, say in the UK, even though tens of thousands of little white and Sikh British girls got raped by immigrants largely from Pakistan. They won't close the borders for that. They won't close the borders despite the fact that the vast majority of the Western populations want far less immigration. They won't close the borders despite the fact that an increasing reliance on a despotic totalitarian regime for, I don't know, things like medicine. Well, they won't close the borders for that, but they might close the borders if the illness spreads to the point where it starts to actually affect them, right? Inside their walled gates, their walled communities. Or it could be similar to the Middle Ages, where the elites locked themselves up in their country estates and let the ravages go through the urban centers and then said, hey, you know what we've just saved a huge amount of money on? Old age pensions. So anyway, I just wanted to sort of point that out. I hope that you will stay safe with all of this. Please, again, if you can help out the show, I'm telling you to go buy groceries. Buy groceries. But if you have a choice between supporting me and buying groceries, please buy the groceries. But if you do have a little from column A and a little from column B, I would certainly appreciate you dropping by freedomain.com/donate. And it's just the last thing I wanted to mention. So way back, for those who've been around this show for a while, this show, it started when I had more tufts of hair. But anyway, so if you've been around for a while, there was a long time ago a whole message board and a whole chat room and so on that was being run off community server. It unfortunately became vulnerable to DDoS attacks, so we had to shut it down. But now, if you join a subscription on Subscribestar, subscribestar.com/freedomain. This is a place used by Sargon of Akkad and Paul Joseph Watson, a bunch of other places. And if you sign up for a subscription there, not only do you get hundreds of posts and private shows and all of that, we have a server which we sit around and chat on, which is great. As I'm working away doing dull stuff like video editing, I will sit and chat with people, which is great. It's sort of a private access thing. We also do voice chats and conversations about stuff, and you do get early and sometimes exclusive releases there. Just wanted to point that out, that as I always do, try to provide maximum value to you, my lovely, lovely listeners. There is a place where, a couple of bucks a month, it starts at $3 a month. Honestly, it's really not too much. And so a couple of bucks a month, you can help me out. Subscribestar.com and get all of those kinds of goodies and chats and meet other listeners, maybe even in your neighborhood. So I just wanted to say, of course, please, I hope that you will listen to this good advice. I hope that this good advice turns out to be something that we don't need to do. But I just wanted to mention all of this and just remind you how much I care, how much I love you guys, how much I want you to stay safe and happy, and how much this these particular glasses reflect the glare from the studio lights. All right, thanks everyone so much. I'll talk to you soon.